I heard a saying that really haunted me, and he said, you can plant a church and simultaneously never make disciples, but if you always make disciples, you always get a church. And that for us was what we wanted to do. Hey, my name is Jay Stovall, and I currently am the pastor of a brand new church called Portrait Church. So I grew up in a family that went to church, loved God. I think my view of God was off. I loved sports, so I didn't take my faith seriously. I love sports so much that I actually ended up getting a basketball scholarship to go to CBU. Going to CBU, I fell in love with Jesus there. Changed my life, changed my perspective. I think what I learned stepping into college is how much more freedom I had and how much that was an empowering thing, but also it was a weighty thing, because now my decisions were impacting so much of who I was going to become. I actually got hurt right 2 weeks before season was going to start. I got put on medical red shirt, and that was kind of like a moment where it started this trajectory of realizing that I had placed so much of my identity and what I could do and how I performed in basketball that when I didn't have it, it was like my whole world went upside down. And I just remember being in a situation where I was kind of faced with the end of myself. Like, it was a moment where God was very clear, like, either you're going to follow me and have faith, or you're just going to keep going down this path and it's ending in just a lack of identity, frustration, you're depressed. And I just really kind of took a step of faith. I actually gave up my partial scholarship, stopped playing basketball, focused on my education, focused on getting involved in campus. There was this progression of just obeying God and just seeing how faithful he was, honestly, because I gave up basketball heading into my sophomore year. And then my junior year, I went on a ISP trip, and it was actually using basketball to share the gospel with people. So I remember the thing that I gave up, God brought back into my life, but said, well, your life is now going to be used for my glory, not what you can do. This guy, he was a Muslim, and he actually would just continue hanging out with me every time we would have a game. And then after the 7th game and our 7th conversation, he's like, yo, man, I want this Jesus that you have. And I had never seen up until that point, me sharing my faith with someone and then being first they never heard of Jesus and now they want a relationship with him. That gave me the ultimate purpose. And I think it was that moment that shifted everything for me to say, okay, whatever I want to do with my life, it's going to be for more moments like this. At the end of 2019, my pastor at the church that I'm at, Vantage Point, he asked me a question no one's ever asked me. And he said, Jay, have you ever considered planting a church? And I was like, absolutely not. Again, I disqualified myself because, again, growing up in the moralistic Christian cultures, I just was I'm not smart enough. I don't have as many degrees. I was just listing all the things. And he saw something in me that he just deposited that day. It was and I told him no. I was like, no, I don't think I don't think that's for me. Then 2020 hit. All of my former students, all of my former interns, so they're all hitting me up. How do we navigate this as followers of Jesus? And it was so much to the point where I'm married now and my wife's like, yo, this is too much. You need to turn your phone off. What it did for me though in that moment was oh, this whole idea of pastoring is not something that's foreign to you. You've actually been doing it. And I'm showing you that I've actually been preparing you for pastoring, maybe just not in the context of that I thought, because essentially the question that these students and my former employees were asking me is how do I follow Jesus in times like this? And it just became very clear the thing that I was experiencing was a burden that God had inside of me for the future of the church. And I had this prayer of God, whatever you want me to do, throw me on the front lines. If you want me to help a church, if you want me to serve in a church, put me on the front lines. And we talked to several pastors, several mentors of my wife and I, people that are really close to us. And we just said, hey, do you think church planting, starting a church is what God's calling us to? And it one after another was we've seen this call on your life. We've just been waiting for you to see it. We would have people randomly come up to us after church hey, when are you guys planning a church? And it was we gave nobody context. We gave no one thoughts. that we were even thinking about it. And then God just made it clear, and we needed our mentors and friends to affirm that we had the character to do this, but also the calling to do it. You know, I'm trying to see the community that I'm in, the people that I meet, first made in God's image. And then that reflects the way I treat them, the value, the dignity that, you know, I care for them with. So it impacts any community. But we got to hear the story of people in the community because the community is shifting. It's becoming more multicultural, more multi-ethnic. And what we heard from the community is that they didn't feel like there were church spaces that reflected that. For us, I think there was a story and a narrative that God was just continuing to show us as I engaged with people in the city, as I connected with people like the mayor, the business owners, like this. There was a story that kept being birthed. So it's like we are in the middle of what I feel like are the nations. Like the church is going to be reflected at the end of scripture where it says every tribe, tongue, and nation. So we wanted to be in a place where like the nations were represented here, and that there was a story that only God could tell, which is bringing these people together. I remember after we launched, like our grand opening service had like 400 people, and people were like, how did you do it? Like, what was the formula? And honestly, the formula was, for me was, we had a burden and we were called to it. God tested us through suffering to see if we actually were called to it. Because I think the thing about God's tests are he doesn't want us to see us fail, but he wants to see what kind of faith we have. And that was very clear to me that, we went through hell in 2022 and we still want to do this. And so we had to really discern who we are and who we're not. And that took months. If you were to look at the statistical data, probably the best mechanism for reaching people who do not have a relationship with God in North America is through planting of other churches. That's like the best, most effective model. Sometimes when you take over another church, they already have kind of they already have kind of an aura and a reputation in the community. And for me, I knew that if I were to revitalize or take over another church and try and grow it, that I wouldn't start with influence. Because it's like some of these churches, it's like taking a huge ship and trying to turn it. You're not going to be able to turn that. That thing's set in a direction. It's going to take a long time. Our long-term vision is that we would love to see a church planted in every major city in the Inland Empire. So our goal, honestly, is not to become a huge tree. But as my old pastor used to say, we want to be a big orchard. So we want to help plant other churches. We want to help develop other leaders. And if we can put and plant a church in the Inland Empire in every major city, we would love and be honored to do that. My prayer is that my wife would be like, man, I would totally do that again because of who you became in the process. And if she could say that, then it's a win. It's a win.